What is the turnaround time when it comes to being an Uber driver and a Lyft driver? Welcome back to Buck Living, a channel all about making money. I've done so many videos about Uber and Lyft and the gig economy, rideshare driving, and more. And this is a unique question I have gotten because with all these videos I've done about Uber and Lyft, I find there's a couple different approaches, mainly two, and it makes sense why. The first approach I find when people watch my videos is they're already driving for Lyft and Uber, and they just want to watch videos about it. They're just interested about the Uber and Lyft culture, if I'd call it that, and ride sharing. The second type of people, though, I find are people being like, all right, I'm considering driving. And what they're going to do, and it makes sense, right? Especially, let's say if you're going to do anything new now, it's kind of crazy that a lot of people go to either Google or YouTube. And in case you didn't know, YouTube is actually the second biggest search engine on the entire internet. It goes Google and then YouTube and then like all the rest of them like Yahoo and Bing and all this kind of stuff. But YouTube has a massive game and actually a massive play in the game when it comes to search engines. And as you can imagine, if people actually want to learn about a given topic, a lot of people prefer a video than a blog post. And as a result of this, of all the videos I've done about Uber and Lyft, this question comes up of people saying, Mark, I'm considering driving, but I'm afraid that I'm going to start driving and then immediately just quit. Or I'm seeing all these negative things about Lyft and Uber. I'm reading all these negative comments about Lyft and Uber. I almost want to know, is it worth it? Is Uber worth it? Is Lyft worth it? Because it doesn't make sense that, like, say, if most people sign up, drive for a little bit, and quit. This is referred to as the turnaround time. Now, I do want to say this video is going to be a very kind of raw, unedited video, very fireside chat style video. I do this every once in a while. Sometimes, I do like point-based videos. I'm like, number one, number two, and they're very like edited like that. Other ones are more like open, casual conversations. Like say if me and you are sitting together at a bar and you're like, hey man, I heard not a lot of people like stay driving. Like it's a very temporary thing. What do you think? Is Uber worth it? Is Lyft worth it? Now, here's what's interesting about the turnaround time with Lyft and Uber, which is kind of funny as a unique starting point. And that is, in a unique way, in a sense, and I stress in a sense, once a driver, kind of always a driver. Now, I know that saying's been used in a lot of industries. I've heard people say, once a Marine, always a Marine. I know people say, when I used to play the saxophone, once a saxophone player, always a saxophone player. But the interesting thing, first off, I want to say about the logistics of being a rideshare driver is this, is when it comes to Uber and Lyft, once you sign up, you're kind of a driver forever, theoretically. One, unless you get deactivated or your account gets disabled, something happens where basically they take away your privilege to be able to drive. The second situation is, which is kind of like unique when it comes to the way Uber and Lyft works, is as long as you keep your documents updated, you're always kind of ready to drive. So I do want to say that starting off. I have had people be like, hey man, like I want to start driving, but I don't know because I can't do, and I don't know where this comes from, but I've had people say, hey, I can't do 10 rides a month. I'm like, what do you mean 10 rides a month? And you're like, oh, well, you have to do 10 rides a month or else Uber and Lyft will kind of take down your account. I'm like, no, you can do 100 rides in 1 month, not drive for 3 months, and then drive again. So I do want to say it's not like a typical job that you have to hit certain quotas. There's not like you have deadlines. It's not like they're going to deactivate your account. Let's say which is kind of interesting. I'm surprised they don't do this, but let's say you're inactive. Let's say you don't drive for 6 months. I feel like it would make sense that Uber and Lyft would say, hey, after 6 months of inactivity, we're going to kind of put your account on hold and you have to reapply. I guess maybe in some ways I see why they don't or why they would do this. I don't know. But they don't do that. So you could not drive for a year and then the next day you could drive, although I will say they do want to see your updated documents. You do have to constantly update your insurance and show that you still have insurance. They want to see maybe your driver's license, of course, your vehicle registration, super important. So all this kind of things come into play that, in a sense, when it comes to your turnaround time, which again, in case you didn't know, is kind of I probably should have mentioned this in the beginning of the video, is what is the typical lifetime of someone joining a job? Some jobs have very quick turnaround time, meaning that people sign up and they leave after a month. And that's the average. The average person working there is a month. So remember, when it comes to the turnaround time for an Uber driver and a Lyft driver, it does get a little skewed given the fact that technically you don't quit, you more just stop driving, but you still have the ability to drive, if that makes sense. So I do want to say that as a positive aspect. I know some people have been like, hey, you know, I'm needing a second side job. I want to be making some money here and there. You know, do you think Lyft and Uber is a really good way to go? And I say, look, you know, the good thing about it, among a lot of the benefits, I've mentioned this before in a bajillion other videos, so I'm going to go through this pretty quick, but is one, the flexible schedule. That's the biggest thing. 2, instant cash outs. 3, the low barrier to entry. All you really need is a driver's license and your own vehicle. You can even rent one if you want. And the 4th one, which I think is another big one, is the fact that it's pretty much an unlimited amount of hours you can drive. I've said this before in numerous videos when I used to be a bartender. There were people I remember asking my boss for more hours. They only worked 20 hours in a week. And they're like, hey, I need more than 20 hours this week. And the boss is like, hey, we're stocked. I can't fill you up. We're completely booked. With Lyft and Uber, you usually don't, and I stress the word don't with a maybe an asterisk on that, have to worry about that. Although, I have mentioned this in other videos, more and more drivers are signing up, which actually brings up a very unique point in this video I'll talk about in a second. There's never been more drivers signing up, ever. Which means the turnaround time, I would predict, to get worse. I'd predict that most drivers would start driving and then quit more now than ever before, especially in the next couple years to come. But anyway, those are the 4 benefits of it. And I'd add a 5th one, talking now about this video specifically, is that if, like, say you're like, hey, I don't want to sign up for a new job and be committed and have to quit, right? Meaning the turnaround time for you would be very fast. You're not really committed to have a quota with Lyft and Uber. There are, of course, a lot of other jobs that, like, if you wanted a second job and you didn't work for 3 or 4 weeks, they say, hey, we haven't heard from you in 3 or 4 weeks. We signed you up. We put you in the system. We created all this kind of stuff for you. We put you on the payroll. We haven't heard from you in a few weeks. We're not going to fire you per se, but basically that's what they're doing, right? With Lyft and Uber, you don't have to worry about that. So the good thing, when it comes to the turnaround time as well for a lot of people, I think it's one of those things that you just kind of sign up for. And then when you feel like driving, you can. If you don't feel like driving, no big deal. So that is one huge benefit. Now, realistically, what is the average time a person drives for Lyft and Uber? I'm not gonna lie, I'm not sure. Now, granted, things are changing a lot. I'll probably do a follow-up video about this when it comes to the hard statistics. There probably is some study or research or stuff like that out there. Uber and Lyft data is actually harder to find than you think. Now, certain things are very easy, like the average hourly rate for drivers, pretty easy. But with the turnaround time, like I mentioned earlier in this video, it is a tough thing to estimate given the fact that to some people, they might drive and say, I'm done, I'm never driving again. Other people might drive and be like, it's not worth it. But then they do a couple rides here. Then they do a couple rides there. So it's tough compared to any other industry, and maybe there's a couple other ones like Lyft and Uber, maybe delivery driving too, where because in a sense, once you sign up, you can always have the ability to work. And there are people who I know who are like, yeah, I did Lyft and Uber for a month. I realized it wasn't worth it full-time, which is a side note, in my opinion, I don't think Lyft and Uber is worth it full-time, at least in the beginning, which is something I'm going to talk about in a second. When they drive for a month, and they're like, all right, not worth it full-time. But one Saturday a month, I'll go out and I'll make a couple $100, like say $300, and I'll just do that once a month. Then it's like, well, they're still working, but not as much. And so, like I said, that's what makes the turnaround time so tricky for this video. Like I said, it was tough for me to find when doing research any conclusive exact amount saying, look, 37 days or something like that. For most jobs, it's very easy to find the turnaround time because it's a hard start and a hard end. Not really with Lyft and Uber. One thing I will say though, like I mentioned in a lot of other videos, honestly, is to at least test out the waters. Sign up, start driving. I suggest doing it in random times. In case you don't know, the peak hours of the morning commutes, 7 to 9 a.m., evening commutes, 5 to 7 p.m., Friday nights and Saturday nights, 8 or 9 p.m. to about 2 or 3 a.m. I'd suggest starting out part-time. I stress part-time, like I said, do not do full-time. Start out part-time, see how it works for your schedule, if you like it or not, and then potentially move to full-time. This is very important, I think, when it comes to the turnaround time, because at least to me, it is interesting, but I will say, after interviewing a lot of drivers and a lot of different people in the Uber and Lyft space, reading all these comments, I've noticed that the turnaround time is worse, meaning it's lower for people who do it full-time. I think there's a couple different reasons why. One is when you jump right into it, and this is, I think, a big thing I've said in a lot of other videos. There's, like anything in life, there's pros to driving and cons. And what I've noticed is when you go from part-time to full-time, the pros increase a little bit, right? Like, that kind of makes sense. That the benefits of Lyft and Uber get more beneficial. That's the right way to word that, right? However, the negative aspects of going from part-time to full-time amplify aggressively. What I mean is, if, let's say, and I'm making this up, the benefits are 2x'd going from part-time to full-time, the negative aspects are 6 or 7x'd. 6 or 7 times worse once you get to full-time for a bunch of different reasons I've mentioned in other videos. I'm not going to go through them too in detail on this video to not make it super, super technical, like, and make it super, super long, but certain things like insurance issues, getting rideshare insurance, which I suggest you do, pay, things with taxes, the maintenance on your car, depreciation, the logistical aspect with Lyft and Uber regarding deactivation. A lot of negative aspects get a lot worse. So I do suggest when it comes to, especially regarding the turnaround time, and for you, if, like, you want that turnaround time to be hopefully not as bad, like, say if you do want to try it out and it does work with your schedule, always start off part-time. I think that's a big thing. Just get into it and really, really feel out. Because I'm telling you, like, you know, after seeing all these comments, it seems like a lot of the people who have a very short turnaround time, where they drive for, like, say, a month, and they're like, I'm done with Lyft and Uber, I'm never going to drive again, do it full-time. However, I will say, I've met a lot of people who drive full-time who absolutely love it, right? So I can't say either way. I will say I think most drivers who I find like it do it part-time. I have noticed that. That's one thing I've noticed kind of across the board. But I've met a lot of drivers who love it full-time. That for them, they're like, I'm never going to do anything else again. I'm making insane money, flexible schedule. I can cash out whenever I want. You know, I didn't have to get a degree or certification. I mean, I guess if you count a driver's license as a certification per se, you know, but they're like, I don't have to do anything. I drive when I want, how I want. I can go to my son or daughter's dance recital. I have time for vacations. I don't have to talk to a boss to get time off. If, like, say I want to hit it hard one week and take it a little bit easier the next week, I could easily do that. So there are benefits doing it full time. Now, when it comes, though, to a lot of drivers commenting on this channel, I do want to mention that, because that's something I've been noticing. The more videos I've been posting and the more views I've been getting, which is kind of cool, by the way, on this channel, in case you don't know. Maybe I'll show you my analytics at some point, because I do a lot of videos about making money, whether it's about, like, cryptocurrency, making money on YouTube, of course, gig economy, videos about everything. I have noticed I've been getting more and more views every month, which is pretty awesome, right? Pretty awesome. So again, I appreciate all the support. And with that, as you can imagine, it's almost inevitable I get more comments. And the one thing I've noticed with all these comments is most of them, I might say probably 90% of the comments I get are negative. Not necessarily towards me, but about Lyft and Uber. And a lot of people saying, don't drive for them, don't drive, don't drive. This would really spark this video of a lot of people saying, Mark, like, I was considering driving, but then I read the comments. I watched one of your videos, and I was like, okay. But then I read the comments, and I'm like, ooh, do a lot of drivers just sign up and then quit? Is the turnaround time that bad with Lyft and Uber? I will say, for someone considering driving, and I want to stress, I do not work for Lyft and Uber. I want to stress that point very, very hard. Lyft and Uber is not perfect, and there's a lot of negative things about them. There's a lot of positive things. So it's important to look on both sides. And I will say, most of the comments are negative towards Lyft and Uber on YouTube. I think that's more like a hidden variable of that. I think it's just the nature of YouTube. And I think if you don't like Lyft and Uber, you're probably more likely to go to a video like mine and comment something negative, at least from my perspective. I've noticed, if anything, when I talk to drivers in person, the more that I've interviewed drivers in person, the more I find drivers in person that I've talked to like Lyft and Uber more. Drivers online hate Lyft and Uber more. Now, it could be, you know, a bunch of hidden variables. So this, maybe if you're commenting on a YouTube channel, maybe you were driving and you stopped and you're like, you know what, F Lyft and Uber, don't like them anymore, and blah, blah, blah. If you're driving in person, maybe it's the honeymoon effect. You know, maybe you just started driving, you're like, oh, this is great. And you haven't really been driving enough to really understand how bad it can get, which, don't get me wrong, can get bad. But then again, too, I've interviewed so many drivers in person, they're like, hey, I'm happy. And maybe to them, they're like, if you're happy driving, do you really need to go? I'm not saying this in a bad way, but like, if you're really happy driving, maybe they don't feel the need to watch YouTube videos. Maybe they don't feel the need to comment something negative, because you're like, hey, I like driving Lyft and Uber, and I have noticed too on this channel, videos that I've done like this, that are kind of fireside chat style video, or me talking about the reasons why a lot of people are quitting, those get a lot of negative comments. But I find a lot of videos I've done about the requirements, or the kind of logistical stuff of Lyft and Uber, I find gets more, if anything, positive comments, right? I do a lot of different types of videos about Lyft and Uber on this channel. Some of them are my opinion, just looking at the data. Some of them are more technical, like how much do drivers actually make in this year, for example. Some of them are more of the requirement type stuff. Some of them are more legal, like what is it like when it comes to rideshare insurance? What happens if you get into an accident, right? Like, so I do a bunch of different types of Lyft and Uber content, and I will say the kind of opinion-based stuff of me just kind of talking off the cusp after, I mean, at this point, I think I've probably looked at well over 500, maybe at least, maybe more than that, anywhere between 500, I'm not exaggerating. I probably read between 500 and 1,000 articles about Lyft and Uber regarding the technical aspects, the numbers, the data. You know, for me, I'm a former accountant, so I'm very data-driven as well, and I believe numbers don't lie, so it's always important to look at the numbers and understand what the numbers represent. And just looking at all this, I will say that when it comes to a lot of drivers, like I said, who do it in person, they really do like it. And their turnaround time is probably a lot longer in terms of, how do I word this the right way, that the turnaround time, they probably drive longer in general than I feel like a lot of people commenting on my channel and on these videos, their turnaround time is probably so short that they're like, yeah, I drove for 2 weeks, everyone's right, Lyft and Uber's horrible, and then they quit. Now, one massive asterisk on this I talked before, a little bit ago, is a lot of drivers being on the road. This is something, and I have to really stress this point home. I think people do understand, but in case this is one of your first times of you watching one of my videos, it's no surprise to anybody that negative stuff on the internet gets more hits, clicks, and audience retention than positive stuff. If I do a video of 5 reasons why you shouldn't do something, I will get way more views on YouTube than if I do a video about 5 reasons why you should do something. Negative stuff always gets more, and it's tough because on this channel, I don't like to make unnecessary videos of me being like, do you know what Uber and Lyft's doing? Because that's kind of annoying, right? It's me, or a lot, and I've seen a lot of people on YouTube do this. We've probably seen this a lot on Facebook and other social media platforms, where someone's like, do you know what you're putting into, like, they create this fear and anxiety and talk about this very pessimistic view of something, and it's just to get clicks. It's just to get people listening and being like, oh my God, did you know it? And we've all seen this probably online. That being said, this is something that does worry me, and that is too many drivers on the road. Now, the turnaround time when it comes to drivers, I've personally found has gotten lower. What that means is I find that drivers, or people who sign up to drive, tend to be driving a lot less, because I'm not going to lie, driving for Lyft and Uber isn't as worth it now as it used to be. This is something I've noticed time and time, that when I first started driving, there were people who would, on average, drive for a couple years, move on to something else, so on and so forth. As time has gone on, I found it's been getting a lot worse. The drivers drive for a month, and it's not worth it. I know someone who said they went out, they drove for a day, and they're like, never again. That's a pretty quick turnaround time, is 1 day. And I hate to say it, although there's a lot of benefits to driving for Lyft and Uber, again, that cannot be discounted, I think that not only is the turnaround time going to get worse, I think, just given everything going on, but I think it's going to hit a very tricky point with so many people signing up. There's never been, in my opinion, and maybe we'll be able to see some statistics about the end of this year or the beginning of next year and all this kind of stuff. There's been a huge wave, given the economy, given the fact that a lot of people are like, wow, I'm working, I've seen this, we've probably seen all memes like this. People are working 2 jobs, still cannot afford food and stuff like this. It's been really rough. And you see that a lot of times these people are like, hey, you know what? I need a 3rd job. Or I was fine with my 1 job, my 9-to-5 job, but I need a 2nd job. What is the classic, cliche example of a good 2nd job that's easy to fit in with your schedule? Lyft and Uber, being a rideshare driver. I might even say delivery driver too, but on this video, I'm really focused on rideshare driving. But I will say all these elements do kind of coincide with delivery driving. I mean, if anything, for my Uber Eats drivers out there or DoorDash drivers out there, it's probably worse, the turnaround time, I think, with delivery driving, if you want to be honest, for a bunch of reasons. But in general, with the amount of people signing up now to be a rideshare driver and a delivery driver, someone working in the gig economy, whether it's they're doing it full-time, whether it's they are doing it part-time because they need more side cash, whatever, that's only going to equal a quicker turnaround time even more than before. And like I said, from my perspective, the turnaround time has gotten lower and lower. More people are signing up and quitting way faster than ever before, as opposed to staying as a driver. And if there's a ton of drivers on the road, I think for the first time maybe ever, you might hit a finite point where you're like, wow, I didn't get any rides. And what's scary, and again, I'm not trying to make this like, again, I don't like to create unnecessary fear or like hype, but it is interesting from my perspective, kind of looking at things in terms of interviewing drivers and comments and blah. I've talked about this before in other videos. If you watch a lot of my videos, this is no surprise to you about me bringing this idea up of there being too many drivers on the road. And on those videos where I have brought it up, I'm now seeing more and more comments of people being like, you know what, Mark? It's already happening. I went out with someone commented, don't quote me, I hope I'm not messing up the numbers. I think it was in Utah, I hope I'm correct. And they said they were on, meaning they have the driver app on, I think it was like 2 hours, and they said they only got 3 rides. That's very, very low. And on average, I'd say, when people ask me how many rides to drivers do an hour, I'd say about 2 to 3 rides an hour. Let's say average it at 2. And now, yes, they only got 3 rides in 2 hours, but apparently they were short rides and weren't that good. I know someone said they had the app on for an entire hour, almost didn't get anything, right? And so these are situations that I've noticed have started to pop up a lot more. And if you're watching this video, I know it's a bit of like a long video, but I really want to go in depth on this, because I feel like for a video like this, a lot of people are probably watching it, at least I think, to consider driving for Lyft and Uber. Because I'm not going to lie, I believe that a turnaround time for a company is a massive sign of how good or bad it is to work there. I remember when I was an accountant and working at the accounting firm, the Big Four, as it's referred to, by the way. I've done some videos about the Big Four already. And the turnaround time is very quick, like a year. And the reason why is it is such a bad place to work. The turnaround time is a big indicator of how bad or good a place is to work. And I've had a lot of people, like I said, look at some of my videos, be curious about driving, and they're like, look, I just don't know because I see so many drivers signing up and then quitting. Is it even worth it to sign up? If the turnaround time is that quick, maybe I just pursue something else and I don't even try driving for Lyft and Uber. I think, though, as time goes on, with it being more and more drivers on the road, that's, in my opinion, only going to equal it being harder and harder for people to actually get those rides and make money doing so. Now, it is tough to say, right? This is purely speculation, but I feel like I could not make this video and at least not mention it, because I think, if anything, that might create the, even maybe more than money, which it kind of is interplay with money, but that might create the biggest impact for the turnaround time of drivers maybe ever. If you turned on the app and you spend an hour, and this happened to me before, years ago. This is years ago, though, when Lyft and Uber wasn't as popular, so I feel like it was a little bit more understandable. But now, if you turn on that app and you don't get a ride for an hour, you just worked an hour and wasted all your time and made literally no money. If anything, you may have made negative money, which could actually happen. If, let's say, you get in your car, and I'm making this up, which I suggest, idling over driving. Don't just drive around aimlessly unless you're going to like a surge pocket. But let's say you get in your car and you turn it on. Or let's say you drive to a surge area because you think you're going to make good money. You don't get a ride for an hour, where you just wasted your time putting more depreciation on your car, wasted that in gas, all this kind of stuff. You just made literally negative money. And I think if that's a situation that's going to happen more and more, I think a lot of people could maybe, sounds kind of bold to say, have a turnaround time of an hour where they start driving, they do an hour, and they're like, I don't get it. I didn't get a ride. WTF, I'm just going to do something else. That could actually be very possible. Now, I don't know how Uber and Lyft is going to manage it algorithmically when it comes to new drivers or old drivers, in terms of, will they give new drivers, and this typically happens with a lot of apps, they might give new drivers a bunch of rides in the beginning because you're like, oh, we want to entice them to start driving. And then maybe for older drivers, we'll give them a little bit less. And a lot of apps do this. Tinder, for example, in case you didn't know, the first, I think it's like week that you're on Tinder, they'll boost you in the search algorithm or whatever just to try and make it seem like you're like, oh, it's kind of like, you know, the first one's always free, right? Where they're like, oh, like, let me give them a bunch of dopamine hits for free of them getting a bunch of matches. And then after a week, you're like, where'd all the matches go? I was getting a bunch for the first week. And they try to entice you in. So it could be that. Again, I'm just making this up, of course. Tough to say what Lyft and Uber is going to do. But if anything, I think that that's going to be the biggest impact of turnaround time. And if you're watching this video considering driving, that is something I would just say to be aware of. Hopefully, this is purely just something that, you know, some articles have been written about. They're like, hey, you know what? Maybe it's not that bad. That's tough to say. But I've seen article after article talking about how more people than ever are signing up to drive for Uber, Lyft, Uber Eats, DoorDash, Postmates, etc. And the only thing that can result of that, in my opinion, is you getting less rides. And with all the comments I've seen on this channel too, of a lot of people commenting on those videos when I have talked about this, saying, yeah, Mark, it's already happening. It's already happened. Like, I'm getting way less rides than before, which means I can't even make money. Even if, not only is Uber and Lyft paying me less than before and taking out a bigger chunk of my earnings, but now I can't even get a ride. That alone, we'll see what happens in the next couple of years. When it comes to turnaround time, could turn it from maybe a couple months, in terms of people only drive for a couple months and then quit, to it being very possible that people now drive for an hour, and given your area, given all these logistics, you get no rides, you make literally negative money. The turnaround time could get even worse.